The city streets were a frenzy of activity, with the midday sun reflecting off the skyscrapers. In the midst of this urban scene, Eliza sat on a sidewalk, her clothes worn, and a distant look in her eyes. She was watching a young newlywed couple with the gaze of someone who had lived many lifetimes. The couple laughed as they walked, holding hands, the breeze tousling the bride's golden hair. They seemed so wrapped up in each other, immune to the hustle and bustle around them. Happiness looked so simple for them, Eliza thought. Eliza had a tired appearance, a mix of wrinkles and dirt on her face, but there was something else that caught the eye, a deep and distinct scar that ran across her cheek, a silent witness to a traumatic past. She often ran her fingers over the scar as if trying to erase the memories it signified. "Hey, Eliza," called Eddie, another homeless resident who was her good friend, interrupting her thoughts. "Daydreaming again, huh?" Eliza gave a half-smile, appreciating his attempt to lift her spirits. "Just watching life go by, Eddie." Eddie followed her gaze to the couple. "Ah, newlyweds. I remember when I was that age. Life was simpler then," he chuckled hoarsely. "I can hardly remember being young," Eliza murmured, her gaze becoming distant again. "So many lost memories," Eddie sighed, sitting down beside her. "That poisoning incident took a lot from you, friend, but you're a survivor. You're here, fighting every day." Eliza nodded. "I was robbed, Eddie. My identity, my life, it's all gone. Sometimes amnesia is a blessing. I don't have to remember the pains of the past." "But you also can't remember the good things," Eddie countered. "Who knows, maybe one day that will change. Maybe one day you'll regain your memory, and everything will make sense again." Eliza looked at Eddie, her eyes showing a glimmer of hope. "Maybe, Eddie. Just maybe." She then turned her gaze back to the couple, watching them until they disappeared from view, wondering if the happiness they displayed would ever be a part of her life again. On another day, like any other, Eliza sat on a faded sidewalk, her eyes fixed on a radiant couple strolling carefreely down the street. She wrapped her worn coat tighter around herself as she felt the chilly autumn breeze, releasing a heavy sigh as her mind wandered about her own existence. She tried to recall her past, unsure if she had family, friends, or anything of the sort. She often wondered if she was surrounded by people who loved her, or if perhaps her past was so bleak that it wasn't even worth recovering her memories. Now, her days were a constant struggle for survival. The sun was still high, but the shadow of the building shielded her as she carefully rummaged through a nearby trash can, collecting empty cans and plastic bottles. Every item counted, every penny helped. Eliza heard a familiar voice. "Hey, Eliza." It was Pete, another homeless person and her good friend. "Anything good today?" he asked, holding a plastic bag full of his own finds. She looked at her own collection and shrugged. "Enough, I guess. Maybe we can get something warm to eat tonight?" Pete smiled, his toothless grin bringing a genuine sparkle. "That's the spirit." With their belongings gathered, Eliza made her way back to the makeshift shelter under the bridge, a shared space with other homeless individuals, a kind of community that, despite the hardships, found comfort and solidarity in each other. "Look who's back," exclaimed Rosie, an older woman with gray hair and a maternal look. "Did you get anything, dear?" Eliza nodded, showing her haul of cans and bottles. "It'll help," Rosie smiled, motioning for Eliza to sit beside her. "We all have our good days and bad days, but together, somehow, we get by." As night fell, they gathered around a small campfire and shared what they had. Some brought bread, others a few cans of soup, and together they made a humble meal. Amidst the darkness of the city under the bridge, there was warmth and companionship. "You know," Eliza began, looking at the dancing flames, "sometimes I just wish I could remember how it used to be. But then I see all of you, and I realize that even in the toughest circumstances, we can still find family." The others nodded deeply, understanding every word. The night progressed, and amidst laughter and shared stories, Eliza felt, for a brief moment, a sense of belonging. On another day, the sun was setting, painting the sky with shades of orange and gold. Eliza sat on a park bench, her eyes lost in the crowd. It was then that she saw the couple again. They seemed to be in their own world, oblivious to the noise and bustle of the city around them. Beside Eliza sat Fuller, another homeless man of average height with dark hair and piercing eyes. He was one of the few who truly understood Eliza and her situation. Watching her closely, he noticed the melancholy in her eyes. "What's wrong?" he asked, leaning forward to capture her gaze. Eliza sighed deeply, her eyes following the couple. "Fuller, it's so hard seeing them like that, so happy and in love. I can't help but wonder what my life was like before all of this. Who did I love? Did I have someone who looked at me that way?" Fuller shifted on the bench, searching for the right words. "Eliza, your story is one of the toughest I've ever heard, but remember, each of us has a battle to face. We can't compare our journey to someone else's." She rubbed her temples as if trying to grasp the memories that eluded her. "But the envy, Fuller. I wish so much to have just a glimpse of my past, a memory, an image, anything that shows me who I was." Fuller held her hand, his touch a comforting reminder that she was not alone. "I know it's hard, Eliza, but maybe, just maybe, one day those memories will come back. The brain is a mysterious organ, and the mind has its own ways of protecting us." Eliza looked at Fuller, her eyes moist with emotion. "Do you really believe that?" Fuller smiled gently, squeezing her hand. "I do. And even if those memories never return, you have us. You have a family here now, and we love you no matter what happens." Eliza leaned in, resting on Fuller, grateful for his friendship and understanding. In that moment, even with the pain and emptiness, she knew she was not alone. In another part of the city, in an elegant house, David walked through the stunning hallway of the family home. Framed photos of past generations looked sternly from the walls, reminding him of the traditions and expectations he carried on his shoulders. Upon entering the living room, he found his parents, Mr. and Mrs. Stern, seated on opulent sofas, their expressions tense. "David," Mr. Stern began with his deep and authoritative voice, "we had hoped you would choose someone suitable." David swallowed hard but maintained an upright posture. "Leslie is suitable for me, Father. She is intelligent, caring, and makes me happy." Mrs. Stern, with her perfectly arranged hair, interjected with a soft but cutting tone, "It's not about happiness, dear. It's about our family's legacy. Leslie comes from a different world than ours." David took a deep breath, feeling a lump in his throat. "Mother, times have changed. What matters is the love and commitment we share, not the amount of money in our bank accounts." Mr. Stern stood up, walking to the window and gazing out at the vast garden. "You know we've always wanted the best for you, a wife who could support you, who understood our way of life." David approached his father, placing a hand on his shoulder. "And Leslie does understand. She supports me, challenges me, and makes me want to be a better person. Isn't that what truly matters?" Silence hung in the room for a moment, with only the ticking of the old clock audible. Then Mrs. Stern spoke, "We just want you to be happy and have a stable life." David looked deeply into his mother's eyes. "And I will be, Mother, with Leslie by my side." After a pause that seemed to last an eternity, Mr. Stern let out a heavy sigh. "All right, David. If this is what you want, we will support you." David, relieved and grateful, hugged his parents, knowing he had won one of the toughest battles of his life. The Stern mansion was abuzz with preparations for the wedding. The gardens were meticulously arranged, and the house was filled with fresh flowers and tempting aromas from the kitchen. Amidst all this, Mr. and Mrs. Stern were in a separate room discussing the final details. "We need something special, something that will mark this day," murmured Mrs. Stern, flipping through a bridal magazine. Mr. Stern, with a shrewd expression, suggested, "How about live music? Something that will not only please the guests, but also show Leslie the difference between our worlds." Mrs. Stern raised an eyebrow, curious. "Do you have something specific in mind?" That afternoon, during the wedding preparations as they walked through the city center, the Sterns spotted Eliza playing her violin with unrestrained passion. Despite her disheveled and weary appearance, a small crowd had gathered around her, drawn to her skill and the emotion that emanated from her music. Eliza played the violin very well, and that's how she managed to earn money to feed herself day by day. "She's perfect," Mr. Stern murmured, a malicious smile forming on his lips. He approached Eliza, waiting for her to finish her piece. Eliza, sensing the approach of the well-dressed couple, stopped playing and looked at them cautiously. "Can I help you?" Mrs. Stern, with a condescending smile, said, "We were absolutely enthralled by your performance. We would like to hire you for a private event. We will pay handsomely." Eliza hesitated for a moment, sizing up the two before her. "It's a wedding," Mr. Stern continued, sensing her hesitation. "A generous payment will be waiting for you at the end." Eliza looked at her violin, thinking of all the cold nights and difficult days. A job like this could help her get some relief. "All right," she agreed. "I accept." The Stern couple exchanged a satisfied glance. The final piece of their plan was in place. They thanked her and walked away, barely containing their anticipation. The Stern couple went over all the details with Eliza, such as the location and time, and bid her farewell. Days passed until the big day arrived. The Stern mansion was illuminated, the gardens resplendent with hundreds of twinkling lights. Well-dressed guests strolled, chatting and laughing. The atmosphere was electric, filled with anticipation for the ceremony about to begin. At the gate, a hesitant silhouette emerged from the shadows, Eliza with her violin in tow. She gazed at the splendor before her, the contrast between her daily life and the opulence that now surrounded her almost overwhelming. She wore the cleanest and neatest outfit she owned, but still, she felt out of place. She was approached by a mansion staff member. "You must be the musician," he said, looking her up and down with a mixed expression of surprise and disdain. "Yes, that's me. I was hired by Mr. and Mrs. Stern," Eliza replied, trying to keep her voice steady. He guided her through the crowd, and murmurs began almost immediately. "Who is she? Did they hire a homeless person to play?" What were the Sterns thinking? Though she tried to focus solely on her music, Eliza couldn't help but overhear the comments. Her face grew warm, and her hands started to tremble. But then a thought occurred to her. She was there for her talent, not for her appearance or life situation. Upon arriving at her designated spot, Eliza began to tune her violin. An older woman dressed in a satin gown approached her. "I'm sorry, dear," she said, "but are you sure you're in the right place?" Eliza looked at her, took a deep breath, and replied with determination, "Yes, I am. I was hired to play, and that's exactly what I'm going to do." The lady seemed a bit taken aback but nodded and walked away. Eliza prepared herself, closing her eyes for a moment and connecting with the music that always comforted her. She was ready to show everyone that her talent transcended any prejudice or judgment. The atmosphere was tense, and the murmur of the guests filled the chandelier-lit room. Every curious gaze fixed on the out-of-place figure of Eliza. She took a deep breath, holding her violin and bowed firmly, seeking courage and focus. The first notes that emanated from her instrument were soft and melodious. Then Eliza's voice rose, clear as crystal, cutting through the charged atmosphere. Each word, each note seemed to suspend time and transport the guests to a different world, a voice that no one expected to come from someone in her situation. It was pure, powerful, and intensely emotional. The whispers faded, and a reverent hush fell over the room. Even the most skeptical were silenced by her transcendent performance. "It's like listening to an angel," whispered one lady to her friend, who simply nodded, her eyes welling up with tears. At the peak of her performance, as the emotion of her music filled the air, images began flooding Eliza's mind. A sunny garden, flowers in full bloom, children's laughter filling the air. A woman with long dark hair was swinging a little girl in her arms, their laughter filling the springtime air. Eliza could smell the flowers, hear the child's laughter, and feel the joy of that moment. But then, a sharp pain struck her, and she saw herself in the reflection of a mirror, a freshly formed scar on her face. She remembered the impact, the shattering glass, and the suffocating feeling of loss. The music grew darker, deeper, reflecting the storm she was reliving. Despite the internal emotional tempest, Eliza's voice never wavered. Her undeniable talent and the sheer strength of her memories resonated with everyone in the room. And as the final note faded into silence, a collective sigh of admiration and emotion permeated the atmosphere. They had witnessed not only a magnificent musical performance, but also a personal journey of pain, rediscovery, and perhaps redemption. The last note of the music reverberated through the room, echoing for a moment that felt like an eternity. Eliza, with her violin still by her side, lowered her eyes and took a deep breath, feeling the weight of her memories and the intensity of the moment. For a moment, no one in the room dared to move or speak. The silence was almost palpable, like a heavy blanket that covered everyone present. The guests were mesmerized, lost in the emotions evoked by Eliza's performance. Many had tears in their eyes, touched in a way they didn't expect. Then, like the first drop in a deluge, a single applause sounded quickly. It was joined by another and another until the entire room erupted in thunderous applause. Claps and cheers resounded in approval and admiration. But then, a slender and agile figure burst from the crowd, her white dress trailing behind her. Leslie, with tears streaming down her face and an expression of shock and recognition, rushed toward the stage. Ignoring the surprised protests of the guests and the confused look from her new husband, she reached Eliza, her eyes locked onto hers. "If you were at this wedding, what would you think was happening? Share your thoughts in the comments, Mom," she whispered, her voice trembling and disbelieving. Eliza, still trying to catch her breath from her performance, looked at the woman in front of her. For a moment, the two studied each other as if searching for answers in each other's gaze. "Leslie," Eliza replied, her voice choked with emotion. She nodded quickly, recognition in her eyes. Without saying another word, Leslie threw herself into Eliza's arms, enveloping her in a tight and desperate embrace. "I knew it. I always knew you'd come back," Leslie sobbed, clinging to Eliza as if her life depended on it. The room, already in a state of shock and admiration for Eliza's performance, now witnessed a reunion that none of them could have predicted. Murmurs of surprise and speculation ran through the crowd. But on the stage, Leslie and Eliza were in a world of their own, lost in the miracle of their unexpected reunion. On stage, Leslie and Eliza remained locked in a desperate embrace, each trying to grasp the reality of that moment. The murmurs of the crowd seemed distant and muffled, and for a moment, time appeared to stand still for both of them. Finally, Leslie pulled back slightly, holding Eliza's hands firmly in hers. She looked deeply into Eliza's eyes, the traces of her tears still glistening on her face. "Mom, I never gave up hope of finding you, even when everyone said it was impossible. I knew you would come back to me." Eliza, her eyes blurred with tears, shook her head in confusion. "Leslie, what happened? How did you know?" Leslie smiled sadly. "Dad told me about the scar, about the accident. He kept a picture of you with him until the day he passed away. I looked at it every night, promising myself that I would find you again." Eliza touched the scar on her face, feeling its rough texture beneath her fingers. "This scar, it's a constant reminder of what I lost. But now I see that it's also a mark of hope, of reunion." Les nodded, tears falling again. "When Dad was gone, he made me promise that I would keep looking for you, that no matter what happened, I would never give up on our family." Eliza swallowed hard, emotions threatening to overwhelm her. "He was..." Leslie interrupted with a nod. "Yes, Mom. He loved you so much. Even after all these years, his love for you never waned. He spoke about you every day, shared stories and memories. He wanted me to know who you were, even if you weren't with us." They embraced again, tighter this time, as if trying to make up for all the lost years around them. The crowd watched in reverent silence, witnessing the power of love and hope that transcends all adversity. The hall was immersed in a mixture of surprise, astonishment, and emotion. In the corner of the room, David's parents watched the scene in disbelief. Their Machiavellian plan had taken a completely unexpected turn. Their initial intentions to humiliate Leslie had been overshadowed by the power of an extraordinary reunion. Mr. Stern, David's father, slowly rose from his seat, his hands trembling as he adjusted his tie. This wasn't what we had in mind, he muttered to his wife, Mrs. Stern, who appeared equally stunned. She shook her head slowly, her eyes fixed on Leslie and Eliza. Who could have imagined a miracle like this? Leslie, with Eliza by her side, walked toward them. Leslie's usually sweet demeanor now bore a firm seriousness. You tried to humiliate me. You used someone's vulnerability to try to discredit my choice, my life. But the universe has a funny way of setting things right. Eliza placed a hand on Leslie's shoulder, seeking serenity. I hold no grudges, she said. Not after finding my daughter. But I hope tonight teaches both of you a lesson about attempting to manipulate fate. Mr. Stern swallowed hard, the words caught in his throat. After a moment, he managed to say, I am deeply sorry. I never imagined our actions could lead to this. Leslie looked at them, her eyes moist but determined. You've achieved your miracle, even if for the wrong reasons. I hope this makes you reflect on your actions and intentions. The hall, once filled with laughter and celebration, was now steeped in collective reflection. What was supposed to be an attempt at degradation had become a powerful lesson about love, destiny, and the unbreakable bonds that keep families together, no matter the circumstances. The music resumed, soft and serene, but the energy in the room had changed. Everyone present knew they had witnessed a unique and unforgettable moment where love triumphed over hate and manipulation. And at the center of it all, mother and daughter, reunited against all odds, celebrated their unexpected union. Thank you for joining us today on Deep Stories. Be sure to like and subscribe and hit that notification bell so you don't miss out on our next video.